let's go. I'm ready.
I just want to know, as a geek question, what have you got there then? What bass is that?
Okay. This.
Oh, wow. Okay. It's an Oroh bass.
Now, the story behind this bass is Take That came out, and the bass player was Paul Turner. Paul Turner is just an unbelievable bass player. He plays for Jamiroquai now, but before that, he had just an amazing career playing for everyone on the pop thing. And he is a real master of sound, and he hears a sound in his head that he really wants to go for certain things. And this didn't have a space in his life anymore. I'm going, dude, use this on Peter Andre's first tour. Take That. If you see any of Take That, the first video stuff with him and Steve Washington, drummer, it's this bass. So, but what the thing was, as you get older, there's two things. I've had gear nicked, and I just thought, if this was ever nicked, oh, what bass you got there? Oh, it's an Oroh bass. All right, what's that then? Do you know what? This is so funny. I've got to be honest with you, Rowan. The reason why this is funny is because I grew up at a time where you don't really talk about yourself. You get on with the job, do the job.
The bass player as well, I'd imagine.
Well, it's just get on with. They don't talk about, that was a very, and I remember being in somewhere and John was saying, oh, or someone was saying, I've just done a session with so and so, and then just giving it that. And so I grew up saying, right, just do the job. Just do the job. Doesn't matter. But so it's funny, somebody asking me questions about stuff that I could talk about forever. Do you know what I mean? I don't get these opportunities,
Well, I want to talk a little bit about you, and maybe not even just bass playing, but music in general. So, I mean, it would be cool to know a little bit about how you started out and your history regarding, bass are your first instrument, or did you get taught something else?
All right, so here's how it went. Apparently when I was 3, I said, I want a ping ping. I didn't know what that was, but wanted a guitar. Went down, I think they wanted to give us violin lessons. I wasn't having it. I wanted to, I don't know where I got that from. But we somehow, guitar didn't quite get on with me at school. Piano did. So I studied piano for a lot of years and loved it. But also, I've got to say this, I grew up at a time and around some incredible creative people. It doesn't matter whether it's music or art or stuff. So I grew up around a lot of people that being creative or playing an instrument wasn't a thing. You had pianos in every pub. It used to be quite smoky in there, but you had pianos people play on a Friday. They'd have bands in there. And they'd have a piano player on the week. So I grew up around a lot of music, around a lot of creative people. And the thing is that when I looked around and realised, crikey, and it just sounds like name dropping now, because I would go to school, on the way to school would be go past Jules Holland's house, and you could hear the piano. I didn't know anything about that, but there was this girl I fancied, and she was telling me about this band, and this band was the band that Jules Holland used to be in. So suddenly I'm into that, you know what I mean? And then at school, where I went, here's the thing, I got to tell you, I feel my influences of music were more based on the fact I grew up at a certain time in a certain place and was very sociable and loved music. And it's like, if you ever think about it, when you were a kid and you learnt a new word, suddenly that word is everywhere.
You want to use it,
suddenly use it, or you hear a lick, or you've learnt something, oh, that person's doing that, or whatever. It was like that, literally. And so the thing is that even though I could have gone off and done other things, the thing that I loved, music was definitely up there. Now, Steve White was just one of the youngest guys to do Live Aid, and my brother and I were into music, and Alan said, oh, my brother's just going to be selling his kit, do you want to come around and have a look? Steve was one of my earliest influences. He played for Paul Weller, Style Council, and has gone off to do his own stuff, and has been now an educator. He was one of my biggest influences because he played Wembley, right? And he's there in his mum and dad's house. So, all right, boys, do you want a cup of tea? And it was just like, we're not worthy. We couldn't afford the drum kit. We were between us. It was like, yes, have a listen to this. And he was like, oh, Paragon, do it. And we were just like, yeah, we'll get back to you, Steve. Thanks so much. Thank you. It was like, we couldn't afford the drum kit. And when we did, we had to hide it under my brother's bed because my parents, they weren't going to have a drum kit in the house. This is going to sound possibly quite vague, but people are what music is. Music are notes, and you've got to go and greet every single one of those notes. So, like when you have a bass, you're saying, oh, I don't really know that note. I don't really know that note. You've got to know all the notes. But people are like that as well, and what I mean by that is, I think that one other thing I'll say as well, music, if done right, takes you places that your ego could never let you stay. right? And what I mean by that is, I mean, I had that
esoteric
does
comment.
that make sense? Because, and I'll say this because I'll explain why. Because I through playing a piece of wood and some strings, I've met some of the most incredible people, and I didn't even think about it like that. So I flew into Atlanta and met Muhammad Ali, and that was just like, you know, I got to hang out with Joe Pesci in LA. That was quite a wild thing. I got to fly on jet planes. I got to private jet planes with just like 7 or 8 of you in the thing. I got to play on Saturday Night Live, Jay Leno, David Letterman show, which were shows that we all listened to.
Yeah, of course.
And it's so and it's, oh, I would love to, and I got to play Wembley. You know, all those things. Now, the thing is, I'm just trying to say that a lot of those things, everyone we come into contact with, it doesn't matter what they do. If they love what they do and they do it with the best of intentions and with all their heart, I think that you can put that into your music, you know, and or it will take you. So this instrument has taken me all over the world. And the thing about that is, the reason why I possibly emphasize that is because in anyone's musical journey, you're going to get obstacles, and you're going to get people that sort of say negative stuff or make you feel not so great. And what happened to me was just simply the fact that the drummer in my class joined Oasis. I remember Alan, on the day that he was playing it up at Earl's Court, getting on the bus and, you know, getting on the train going to London. He goes, "You're playing Earl's Court and you're getting on the train." It was just one of those really funny things. And the point I'm trying to make is that you kind of think, well, if they can do it, I can do it.
Yeah.
Not to the same extent, not the same thing, but it's possible. Right now, the thing is, I used to see Alan. He'd be serving at a place called Foots, a drum shop, and he was like playing in a couple of bands and whatnot. After school, that is, after, you know, left school and everything. And he was like, "Oh, I know, I might give up." He went on to join one of the biggest bands on the planet, one of the biggest influences of a lot of people in the 90s. Point, I figured out I like to be a sideman. These are the cool guys that came through and just quite simply laid it down and went off and played with other people and were incredible. There was a culmination of things. I got into Miles Davis. I listened to Miles Davis when I was doing my homework, and just be like, there was a song, Freedom Jazz Dance.
Yeah, no, it's
with Tony Williams. Yeah, with Tony Williams and Ron Carter. It was a jazz tune, right? But what they did with the Miles thing, I had to stop my homework for a second and listen. And at that point, I realized a couple of things were aligning. I'm playing in the band with, he hasn't joined Oasis or anything yet, but I love music. And then what I realized was I was a sort of student, you know, trying to do other things than music, but my true calling was music. And I said to my economics teacher, Mr. Boyden, "So have you heard of Miles Davis?" And he hadn't. And when I realized that they're doing what makes them work, what makes them tick. You only get one. We're only on this planet for a look around. So you got to do what makes you happy, man. Like, because I'd seen people do jobs for 50 years and drop down dead the day they retired, doing a job they didn't even like. It was like, so I was like, I got to a point where studying was great, but this is what I wanted to do. So I had a lot of encouragement from a lot of teachers because I was musical. I hadn't really done it to, I want to be a musician from the age of 11, 12. In actual fact, my parents discouraged me, and I'll possibly get onto that in part 2. There's another story altogether. But the point is that a teacher said to me, "Look, you should play bass because you're always going to need one in an orchestra." So I played upright classical music, and I figured you could always play. There was, whether it's country, whether it's funk, whether it's folk, whether it's classical, everyone had a bass line of sorts, and I was like, wow, there's a similarity between all my favorite bass players and all the biggest influences, which would, you know, if I took even just Steve Waters and DNS's and Pino, it was never what they played. It was the feel and the intention with which what they. So it's like that's what a great singer wants to hear. That's what you want to hear on a jazz record. It's just a bass player laying it down. So my favorite bass players and influences were people that could just groove. So the point I'm making is I learned from everyone that I come in contact with. Everyone that was really, there were some really cool experiences looking back on it, but unfortunately it's the negative ones that actually form who you are. So basically, one thing that happened was someone says you're not going to make it, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to work hard to try and because I love this. I'm not doing it for you. I'm not doing it for your approval either. And you would go out, get things wrong, gigs, and you would learn by going home and getting it right. Does that make any sense? I'm rambling,
totally.
but I hope I'm just trying to tell you all this because basically, like I said, music has taken me to places that Oroh Angiama will never be able to go, never be cool about. Now, the thing is, there have been like 4 or 5 seminal drummers that have changed my life forever, and bass players as well. So Steve White, then of course, growing up with Alan White, then there've been a myriad of amazing drummers. And the reason I talk about that marriage is because that's where I feel the most comfortable. Unfortunately, I just loved great rhythm sections, and bigger picture was love great music. So it was never about just what the bass player was playing. It's about how is he sitting with the drummer. Now, for me, there was something magical every time Paul Turner played with Frank Tonto. I've got to say that there was something magical about the way that Mark Mondaisy plays with pretty much anybody. Another incredible, so his brother Michael and Gary Crosby in Courtney's band. Then I'll go on to say that Steve Gadd, and I asked him about this actually. I used to check a lot of videos or ask musicians what were they checking out. There was one gig where Grover Washington Jr., it's like 1978, where he's playing with Auntie Jackson and they're playing a live gig, and it's all up there for everyone to see. And now, I could be wrong, right? But the following week, he's playing Central Park with Paul Simon, and it's him and Steve Gadd against Auntie Jackson and Steve Gadd. Within a week, can you imagine that? Played with 2 colossal ones, a different style, and now they're going to go off and do this thing, and that was just them going to work. That's just like a day's work, you know. I'm going to now. The thing is, for me, I just thought that's just the coolest thing, and to find out they do that over here. Now, of course, I caught on the end of that, but the players that I talked about, they had all kind of been around when there was a lot of playing. There's a really funny thing over here, I experienced anyway, where basically people would be polite to your face but not really tell you what you need to do to get better.
Yeah.
Whereas in America, people just tell you straight, listen, mate, Oroh, you're great. You need to work on this. Come back next week. Don't come back if you haven't sort of sussed this out. And over here, there's a lot of, you know, schools of whatever. But I've been around, sort of, oh yeah. So whereas with Neil and a couple of other people, they'll just tell you straight, this is what you need to do. Other players, so Neil was a big influence, and it was weird because everything after that, Neil played, you know, proper gigs, as it were, and he knew how to project. Everyone else hadn't had that experience, so they didn't know about sound and how you've really got to sometimes give it some. So I had that amazing experience. Then fast forward, got to do a lot of stuff with Sam Agard, who's another incredible drummer. Please check him out. And then from there, I got to a point where when I started, I was like the youngest guy in the band, sort of thing, just doing whatever. I got to work with some signed artists, and that was incredible. But I'd worked with the same record companies, and so I'd worked with EMI for it's like 95 or something like that. Fast forward 10 years later, I knew people that had come in on their first day who worked, now were the manager of, you know, the section when they were the bottom person, or even funnily enough, I think it's now the president of Atlantic Records over here. We were in a band together and we shared a studio together. And Ed, you know, signed he signed Ed Sheeran. Yeah, okay. Sheeran. So it's just like, you know, stuff that you're kind of, I could not make this up. He was a drummer. He played drums in a band with me, you know, and then we shared a studio. And then he's like, oh, I'm going to get into work. So the point I'm making is, I got to a point where I was MDing. I got known for MDing to up and coming artists where they'd never had much budget and stuff, but they wanted to sound amazing. And I got into a little niche of a couple of artists like Professor Green, Corinne Bailey Ray. I've done some stuff with Katie Mellor or Mike Batt and Paloma Faith. Some other people, you know, some names back then. And but someone had seen that and said, "Who put that together?" And that turned out to be Tom Jones's management. So Tom Jones is thinking about doing a couple of things. He was coming over from America, and I'd been a fan of all the stuff that he'd done. What an incredible voice, people! Yeah. And now I get the opportunity to MD a band for him, and the budget was fine. You know, for me, the money was great, everything. And it's like, you know, they said, "Who do you want?" And one of my favourite drummers, just because one of the reasons was he was a Coventry lad, and there's something about Coventry drummers. I've got to get onto that. I'll try and be as quick as I can. Basically, they said you can have whoever you want in your band. And I sat and thought about when I was coming up, most musicians didn't really have any time for me because I would stalk these gigs. I go to every single gig I could, you know, not just to sit in and play, but just to kind of watch. And I'd be the fixer, oh, there he is again, oh, there he is again. And one of the drummers, most of them would start, you know, they're big time, they haven't got time for me, you know. One of them always had time for me and was killer. And his name was Pete Lewinson. And Pete and Steve, in the 90s, you could see them playing in little clubs. By the end of 95, no, you'd have to see them. They would be doing stuff that would take them away for 18, 24, 2, 3, 4 years, because they were doing the Spice Girls. Steve was doing Spice Girls. Pete was doing Simply Red. They were doing, Sade. It was just like, what do you want to talk about? They'd done, and they just sounded great. And I just said, oh, is it possible to see if I can get this drummer? And I got Pete in. And Pete and I hadn't really played before, but he changed my whole perception on life and music, because I played with lots of drummers that played in different styles or thought they played a bit of jazz. But he was straight up a pop drummer and just sounded killing. Just sounded like, people that kind of go, they don't even like the style that they're playing it, but they've got to do it for function. He came in and just made it sound authentic. And him and the other Coventry boy, Neil Wilkinson, playing with those two has been the most humbling thing, because it takes you back to square one. After I played with Pete, I thought, it doesn't get any better than that. Oh, wow. Get to play on a little function, and it felt like we were taking off on a jet plane with Neil. You kind of go, okay, everything that the drummers have said about time, sound, none of the flashy stuff, which he can do, and he's an amazing reader. He would come in and respect the gig he is on. And I thought, and it turned out, it turned out that he also was from Coventry, and Pete had seen him gone to his masterclasses when he was a kid. Does that make sense? So Pete, now here's the funny thing, right? Who was one of his influences was a drummer called Kenny Clare. Now Kenny Clare is a legend in my book, and Kenny Clare, look him up. He was a local lad from here. So, and he played with Tony Bennett. So every time Tony Bennett would come over, he would call for Kenny Clare. Now, Kenny Clare, I don't really need to go on about, because that's another story altogether. But the fact is look him up. His name's Kenny Clare, and he was just a legend. There was loads of people, but he's special for me because of the lineage. Music affects us all, wherever we're from, however much money we've got. If we had £1 million, do you think we don't want to hear music? We want to hear more music. Thanks very much. Do you know what I mean? It's a big part of who we are, and it's a real. To be able to, like, this period now makes us all reassess who we are and what we want from life. Because, man, the strangest thing is, I love playing bass, but I love playing with drummers, other musicians. That was part of the deal. Suddenly you can be as brilliant as you want to be technically, or sight read, or whatever you want to do. The actual thing of playing with people is a big aspect of music. And the storytelling part is a big aspect of music, is a big aspect of what we do. And so that's why these stories, for me, are important upon someone like yourself, because that's really what I'm about. I mean, like I said, my excitement about drums is because I see this as an extension of the drums, really. And you're just hanging on and trying to be a marriage to that. So check, if you don't, I mean, whoever's watching this, Abel Boyle Jr., so I've mentioned Neil Wilkinson, Kenny Clare, Abel Boyle Jr., Pete Lewinson, Steve Lewinson, Steve Waters, Steve White, Alan White. I could go on, because Neil Conti, those people are, now every generation has their styles of music and their time. And all I want to impress upon anyone that's listening to this is, there will be a time when you get an opportunity, and everything you are and everything you want to be and everything, there's an opportunity that comes your way. It comes to all of us, whether we see it or not. And it's just about being ready and being aware and having yourself together as a human being, because music takes you places your ego won't let you stay. Does that make sense? So anyway, you got any questions for me? I could go on.
I'd like to. There's so much that we could go into. I mean, it'd be nice to. You've talked about some of those drummers and musicians that have affected you so much. It'd be nice to hear about some particular albums that you. Okay, so on the spot, but.
Do you want me to do it now? I can do that. It's easy.
Yeah, go for it. Let's share.
Okay, so I'd say that Nothing Like the Sun, Darryl Jones.
Okay.
And I met Darryl Jones a bunch of times, and he's been one of my biggest. I say this all the time, but he's been one of my biggest influences. I'd say, What You're Gonna Do for Me with Andrew Jackson. Everybody knows that. I would say any record of Stevie Wonder's. Is incredible. Anything with now obviously the funniest part is this, anything with Pino on, anything is good. Anything he does, it fits that music. There's one thing, right? I've loved pretty much everything he's done. Every time he's done something, he's been able to go and have his own musical voice, and it's him, and it just fits that music. So I'm talking about whether that's I Assassin, Gary Newman, or his first record, Jules Holland and His Millionaires, was a record that's got Pino on the front playing double bass. He doesn't play double bass. But that was George Holland's first album. That's around about 1981, 1980. I'd say around about that time. I could be wrong. Of course, everyone's listening to the stuff that he's done with John Mayer, but there is an album by Tony O'Malley live at Ronnie Scott's with Andy Newmark. Woo! And he's playing live, and oh man! And I remember the funny thing is, I used to stalk a lot of bass players. I got to be honest with you. So I go to Ronnie's when I wasn't old enough. The guy Monty on the door. Are you old enough to be here? Yeah, yeah. Do you know what I mean? I wasn't, right? Another big sort of, so that anything Pino. Then there's an album called by Dave Holland called Extensions, where I'd never heard the bass sound so clear. Sorry, or so that's a Dave Holland part that Marvin Smith, that blew me away. So those, I mean, I'm talking about albums that are just kind of just maybe hidden, but they're there and they're great. I can't